Zach LaVine is arguably having one of his most efficient seasons in his NBA career, even despite the numbers not quite reaching the heights of what they had before. On today's episode, we're going to talk about what Zach LaVine's doing with this season and why it's so special to see Zach LaVine play the way that he plays. But yet, teams are still trying to undercut the Bulls in trade talks. That ain't going to happen. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Plus, we're going to talk about Coby White and his comments on his dunking and preview today's game against the Indiana Pacers. All that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into it for today, man. I want to start off with talking about Zach LaVine. I've talked a lot about Coby White lately, even talked about Josh Giddey, talked about Nikola Vucevic a little while ago, but one thing that I have not really dived deep into is the play of Zach LaVine this season. Like, Zach LaVine right now is playing some of the best and most efficient basketball of his NBA career, despite, his usage rate going down, his true shooting percentage has gone up. He's just become a really efficient player, and I want to spend some time diving into some of those numbers on today's episode. And, it's really good to see Zach LaVine bounce back in the manner in which he has, right? Especially after last year and over that whole season, basically people were tearing apart Zach LaVine's game. Even some Bulls fans now still to this day tear down Zach LaVine's game. Now, last season, Zach LaVine had a usage rate of 23.9. Now, last season, we're going to take that and throw it out. He didn't play very many games. When you look at the last two seasons prior to that, he had a usage rate of 27.9 and 27.6. Prior to that, he was coming off back-to-back years of 30% usage rates. This season for the Chicago Bulls is down to 25.6%, but he's having the highest true shooting percentage of his career at 64%. And he's just, Zach LaVine overall, a better defensive player as well, taking way more of the defensive assignments. We've seen games in which Zach LaVine has asked for the better perimeter defensive assignment. Now, it still has been a mixed bag at times for Zach LaVine defensively, but one thing that you can't state or say anymore is that Zach LaVine has fallen asleep defensively. Zach LaVine has been engaged defensively. He's been paying attention defensively. He's been awesome. Zach LaVine, when players that Zach LaVine guard are on average shooting almost 2% less than they do when for their career on the season, right? That's not. I get it. It's only 2%, and you look at 2% and say, how big is that really? But that is pretty major when it comes down to it. The Bulls are 8.5 points better when Zach LaVine's on the court, and we score 7.5 points more per 100 possessions when Zach LaVine's on the court, and our effective field goal shooting percentage goes up almost 5%. And by the way, Zach LaVine is having his best season as far as turnovers. The Bulls' turnovers go down by 2% when Zach LaVine's on the court. That's the most they've gone down in his career. You're looking at other times where it's been positive for Zach LaVine. We're talking about 0.2, 0.6%. Zach LaVine is rounding out and becoming a much more complete player, and it seems like Zach LaVine has gotten to that point where he's very comfortable letting the game come to him. He's not forcing it anymore. He also realizes that he has a team around him, that he doesn't necessarily have to do all the heavy lifting, and he's trusting his teammates more. But then when you look at the last 5 and 10 games for Zach LaVine, it becomes even more special. Over the last 5 games, he's averaging 30.4 points per game on 55% shooting from the field, 51% shooting from 3. He's averaging that. It's really good what Zach LaVine is doing. A true shooting percentage of 66.4% over the last 5 games, and an effective field goal shooting percentage of 63.4%. Zach LaVine is having an efficient and a good season overall. And by the way, 50, 40, 90, he's also 80% from the free throw line. I'd like to see that a little get a little bit higher because he is getting 5 free throw attempts per game over the last 5 games. Those are really good numbers for Zach LaVine. just the free throw, I want to see that up a little bit, but it is for the whole team needs to be better at shooting free throws. Then when you look for the last 10 games for Zach LaVine, 25.9 points per game, so basically 26 points per game, on 51% shooting from the field, 47.9% shooting from three. He's having true shooting percentage of almost 65% and a 61% effective field goal shooting percentage, and still getting to the free throw line 5 times per game, hitting that at an 84% clip. Zach LaVine right now is balling. But you know what else Zach LaVine is doing? Yes, he had a near triple-double the other day. We always knew that Zach LaVine was a solid rebounder for his position, but Zach LaVine is also creating, on average, almost 11 points per game off assists. 10.8 points per game created off Zach LaVine passes. And oh, by the way as well, while he's passing more and he's averaging 4.5 assists, he's only averaging 1.4 turnovers off bad passes, which is something that's definitely plagued Zach LaVine before. Now, his turnover rate, still 2.9. He needs to get that together a little bit. But when it comes down to it, Zach LaVine is just a much more complete basketball player. And when you go back to the fact that Zach LaVine is not in the top 10 of voting for guards in the Eastern Conference, that Jordan Poole is a player that's right now been voted higher on the All-Star voting than Zach LaVine, Zachary LaVine? Like, what is everybody watching that we're not seeing? Because I'm telling you what, based off the numbers that we're seeing here, Zach LaVine is putting together an all-star caliber season. Now, will he end up being an all-star? That remains to be seen. But Zach LaVine is right now playing great basketball when it comes down to it. And he's taken 7 3-pointers per game since December 1st. Zach LaVine is balling. And then when you look at his numbers since Christmas, right, which isn't the largest sample size, but only Nikola Jokic and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander are averaging more points than Zach LaVine, and he's averaging 30.4. They're averaging 33.9 for Shai, 33.6 for Jokic. But again, Zach LaVine, we're talking about a player that right now is not even voted into being in the top 10 of guards in the All-Star vote. That's a problem. And this goes to the continued problem in the NBA around narratives, right? And especially for a team like the Bulls who aren't on national TV a whole hell of a lot, but the national media is able to craft such narratives on players that it hurts them. Because unless you're a Chicago Bulls fan or the Chicago Bulls play your favorite team and you're a member of League Pass, a lot of people aren't watching the Chicago Bulls like that, right? Zach LaVine is putting together arguably one of his best seasons. And this, I want to transfer back over to the conversation around trades, right? And the reason why I am perfectly okay and fine with the Chicago Bulls not moving off Zach LaVine, because I tell you what, Zach LaVine's putting up these type of numbers, and teams want to undercut you on offering a protected first over a first outright. If that's what's continually happening here, no, the Bulls would be stupid and crazy to trade Zach LaVine when if those are the type of offers that they're getting. You do not trade. If you trade Zach LaVine for just salary cap filler and a protected first round pick, you're not only losing that trade outright, I don't give a damn who you end up drafting with that first. It's not going to be Zachary LaVine. And that's the problem, and that's the place that the Bulls find themselves in. Zach is too good to trade for nothing, right? And the Bulls aren't bad enough to outwardly keep their top 10 pick. They need some luck. But I tell you what, that may be the best case scenario. And it seems like Billy Donovan and Zach LaVine, I got to give credit to Billy Donovan for that as well. It seems like that relationship with Zach LaVine has been repaired. I don't know how much you guys pay attention to the sidelines, but I'm seeing more of Zach LaVine and Billy Donovan talking and laughing and joking and timeouts and things like that than I've seen the last 2 years. So not only has that relationship been repaired, which is one of the reasons why reportedly Zach LaVine maybe even wanted out or the Bulls were looking to move him. If that relationship has truly been repaired, whether it's just surface level or not, and they're just doing it for the business aspect, whatever it is, if that relationship has been repaired, on top of the play of Zach LaVine, on top of how he's making teammates around him better while also fitting in and understanding when they need his scoring versus not, all those things get into a situation in which trading Zach LaVine for pennies on the dollar would be idiotic at this point. And no, the Chicago Bulls should not do that just because of they're not keeping their top 10 pick. That's just my opinion. That's my view. Yes, it has changed, but Zach LaVine has just, I mean, arguably, like I've said, this is Zach LaVine's best season. And again, he's averaged more points per game for sure. But when you look at the talent that's on this team, The way that the ball is being spread around, the fact that Zach LaVine is not averaging as many points per game as he did at other times in his career is perfectly fine because he's a more efficient player right now. And efficiency over point total is better as far as when it comes to winning basketball games, at least in my opinion. But you guys can let me know how you feel on all that, as always, down below. Now, let's get into just a quick one on this one. Coby White was, after his poster dunk on Wemby this season, and it's only Coby White's second dunk of the season. Coby White was asked why he doesn't dunk more. He said this: "No, you see the pace we're playing at? I get tired, for real. I get tired," which I love. He says 2 points is 2 points. The one in Charlotte, Mark Williams had like 3 blocks that game. If I don't dunk it, maybe he's going to block it. And then against Wemby, same thing. If I don't dunk it and both came in, a crucial part of the game. For me, I don't got that effortless bounce like Zach, Julian, and Patrick Williams, those type of guys. I got power. I got to jump. You see these arms? I don't have the wingspan. I got to jump. I actually got to jump. So, a lot of people were asking, why doesn't Coby White dunk the ball more often? And he just laid it out there. It's not because he can't dunk. It's because that he has to exert so much more energy to dunk because, he doesn't have the hop of Zach LaVine. He doesn't have the crazy wingspan of like Amadis Busilis, right? So because of that, I love the honesty from Coby White. I love the realization that he says, hey, listen, look at my arms, fam. Like, what do you expect me to do out here, right? Yeah, you're only going to get 2 dunks at this part of the season because look at these arms. Like, Coby White, and I talked about it, so I'm not going to belabor the point or talk a lot about it more on this episode, but one of the things with Coby White that you love seeing when he's playing well and he's back his confidence going and things like that is he just has such a great personality. He has the type of personality you look at and that you say, hey, yeah, I love this guy on my team. And, for the large part at the beginning of the season where Bulls fans were like, trade Coby, trade this, do that. This is why I did not want Coby White traded, not only because of him growing as a leader, but because of the upside. Now, Coby does have to become a much more consistent player, right? I think, and even Coby White's biggest fans will say and admit he does need to be more consistent. But outside of that, Coby White is just such a damn good guy, man. And he's just one of those guys you like to root for, at least in my opinion. I like to root for Coby White, and I hope that he has a great season remaining for the Chicago Bulls. And then hopefully, like, that slump is gone. He can be a lot more consistent here to finish the season. But I know there's going to be a lot of doubters on how consistent he can stay, and those are warranted because of his play. And we'll see how it comes down to. But I wanted to get into a more, I won't call it philosophical question because I don't think it's that deep. But I on yesterday's episode, I talked about the fact that the Bulls aren't tanking. I even put a poll up on Chicago Bulls Central in the community tab. I'm going to try to start doing more interactions, more polls there as well. So make sure you guys stay in tune and check out more than just the video feed on the YouTube channel because I'm going to start, like I said, I'm going to start trying to get more interactive. I'm taking the social media aspect of this job a lot more seriously here in 2025. That was something that I wanted to do more because, listen, the one thing, if anything's holding this channel back from growth is the fact that I'm not very active on social media with this channel. But with that said, I put a poll out in the community tab, right? And I asked this: do you agree with the Bulls' decision not to tank this season? And I was actually surprised by the results. 53% of you guys said, yes, competing is the right approach. 33% of you guys said, no, they should prioritize getting a high draft pick. And 14% of you guys said that you were undecided. I think that's all fair, right? And the question that I have for the people that are undecided and the people who are more fans of tanking and making sure you keep that top 10 pick, the question that I want to bring here is, how far would the Bulls have to go, or how good would they have to look in the playoffs or the play-in for you to feel more comfortable about the Bulls not keeping the pick? And this is a question that I had to ask myself, right? There's so much conversation being about, all right, well, if the Bulls make it to the play-in, then really what's next? I've had that conversation, right? I've said, well, how do you improve going forward after that? But I think the thing is that what would have to happen in the play-in or playoffs for it to be like, okay, we didn't keep the top 10 pick, but we got this, right? And I looked at that and I said this, right? I think if the Bulls actually made it out the play-in, right, and made it into the first round of the playoffs, that is a barrier of entry to get into that conversation and say, well, we went further than what we went the last 2 years, and we're doing it with a much younger core. We've gone considerably younger, so thus it's better, right? And I can understand that argument. Then naturally my mind went to, okay, if we go to the playoffs, how are we performing in that? Even if we get swept, I'm just thinking worst case scenario, what performances will we need to see? What's the minute rotation that we would need to see to where it feels like, all right, we gained something from this. It may not be as good as if the top 10 pick worked out, but at least we gained something from this, right? And I don't think that the Bulls, like, I'm not going to present it as like the Bulls have to go on a run to the second round, because I think that that's going to be very difficult for the Bulls. I think that that is, with the defensive, lack of efficiency that we have, the lack of half-court offense that we have, I think all those things play out. But is it that, all right, if we go to the playoffs and this time Coby White plays consistently and good, and him and Ayo are a big part of whatever we do in the playoffs, along with Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic, is it that does Manas Bucilis average 20 minutes per game in the play-in and playoffs, and that type of atmosphere helps his development along? You see that. Julian Phillips and Dalen Terry are a big part of the Chicago Bulls rotation game to game, and the last time we even made the play-in, or even the last time we were in the playoffs, Julian wasn't on the team, and they definitely, because last year in the play-in, Julian was hurt, so he didn't play. So is that enough with his 15 minutes per game that you're upping the development of those guys? And I'm of two minds with it, right? Because we know that Billy Donovan is a coach that plays to win. And every coach should. I think every coach does, right? Despite some. And so the concern that I would have then is that if the Bulls make it in the play-in, make it out the play-in and into the playoffs, are we going to actually see Billy Donovan rely more on veterans than those young guys? And then at that case, are we really gaining the playoff experience for those young guys? Like if we get to the playoffs, let's say Torrey Craig is still on the roster, THT still on the roster, are those guys going to play more because of them being veterans and being in playoff games more? Is Billy Donovan going to play those guys more than Julian Phillips and Dalen Terry and Manas Bucilis? That's the question that I have here, right? And so because of that, it raises some questions and some concerns, but it's just a question that I wanted to throw to you guys. I probably will put it on the community tab, but also for viewers of the channel, I would love for you guys to have a really in-depth conversation on this. If the Bulls forego their draft pick and they compete and they play hard to make it into the play-in, to make it into the playoffs, whatever it ends up being, what would you need to see from this team for it to be, all right, we didn't get the top 10 pick, but this is enough. I feel like this is enough, and we'll worry about the picks going forward. Let me know that down below. I just feel like that's an interesting conversation to have, and I'd love to hear from you guys on that. Or you can also leave a voicemail. You can air that out. We'll play it on the mailbag on Saturday. The number to do that, 773-270-2799. All right, with that said, let's get into the last topic for today. The Bulls are going out on the road to face off against the Indiana Pacers. And while the Pacers are a team that has struggled at times this season, right? For the majority of the season so far that they've struggled, they are only right now 1.5 games above the Chicago Bulls in the standings. They are the 8th seed right now, but they're 7-3 in their last 10. They're on a 3-game winning streak. And so I want to look at how the Indiana Pacers have been playing over the last 5 and 10 games. And you could see that this could be a very difficult matchup for the Bulls. Over the last 5 games, the Indiana Pacers have a positive net rating of 8.9, which actually ranks for 6th in the NBA. Their offensive firepower is back to being one of the best in the NBA. They have an offensive rating over the last 5 games of 123.1, which is actually number 1 in the NBA. And while their defense last year was terrible, over this reach and stretch as well, they have a defensive rating of 114.2, which is 15th, right in the middle of the pack of the NBA. When you have an offense that is that good, you don't need to have a great defense. As long as you have an efficient offense and a halfway solid defense, it makes it a tough matchup, especially for the Chicago Bulls team that defensively isn't always the best. The Indiana Pacers over the last 5 games as well also hold the second best true shooting percentage in the NBA at 60.3. An effective field goal shooting percentage that's third in the NBA, 57, and they're spreading the ball around, 65% assist percentage in those games. And by the way, they're rebounding the ball really well also. This is a game in which the Bulls have to execute. They have to really, and it could come down to another big quarter, third, fourth, whatever it is, but you got to execute against this Pacers team because this Pacers team has started to find its footing. And with that being said, as long as they keep finding their footing, it's going to become more and more difficult for the Chicago Bulls in this game. And again, the margin of error for the Bulls, right? We know we have become a live by the 3, die by the 3 team, but that has started to change over the last 2 games. You have seen over the last 2 games, the Bulls realize, hey, our 3 isn't falling. Let's go run some half-court offense. Let's attack the paint. Let's try to attack the rim. Coby, Josh Giddey have been really big parts of that, as well as Zach LaVine. We may need to see that again, right? This is a Pacer team that does it via their depth that they have on this team. And so the Bulls got to come in this one prepared. I'm really excited to see the game plan of Billy Donovan for this game, because if it's not a really good game plan, it can end up being very ugly game for the Chicago Bulls. So the Bulls got to be prepared in this one. This is not one of those games you can come in and only hope by your three-point shooting it's going to win. With the way that the Pacers offense has been playing, three-point shooting alone is not going to get you a higher probability to win this game. You also have to lock in defensively. And we've seen the Bulls kick it into a different gear defensively here lately. Can they do it again against the Pacers? That's one of the biggest questions here. And I hope that they can. I hope that they can, because if they do, if they lock in, this team, as we've seen, can really compete with anyone. This is one of the, this is a game with the opponent above 500. They are now one game above 500, so the Chicago Bulls have that. But then after this game, they start off on that tear against teams that are below 500. We got Washington, Sacramento, New Orleans in the next three games after this, all at home. So the Bulls need to take care of this. This will be our second three-game winning streak of the year if we're able to get this dub tonight against the Pacers. And let's hope that the Bulls can. Because listen, it's a lot better talking about Bulls wins than Bulls losses. But let me know what you guys think on everything down below. Make sure you're following the show at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. BullsCentralPod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that's thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.